Today I'm coming to you from Honolulu, Hawaii, but next week I'll be coming to you from the UK, I believe. Thank you for coming. So today we're going to talk about teaching small talk, and so this one's particularly geared for adults, although you can adapt some of the activities for teenagers as well, I think. So you can find all the resources at tinyurl.com/ELT-links, and you can also download the certificate of attendance for this workshop there as well. So why teach small talk? Well, first of all, let's see what small talk is. Now, earlier I asked participants in the chat box what they believe small talk was. And a teacher says, who's logged in, had written something really great. She said, and she's from Hollywood, and she said, small talk for me is the essential vocabulary students use to convey their ideas. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we teach small talk, because it's a way of having them have emergent language. And this is going to consist of many of their conversations. If we teach them how to effectively have small talk, then we're able to teach them how to practice English, because many times when they're going traveling or when they're in a business meeting or those situations where they have the opportunity to speak and try practicing their English, it's going to be in small talk situations. They're not going to do a lot of talking. They're going to have short pieces of conversation, some of it formal, some of it informal, and it's going to have to come from within them. It's going to have to be emergent language, language that emerges from them, from their vocabulary, and we won't be there to help them. So I think that's one of the most important reasons to teach small talk. Another time is it helps them at work. The more conversations they have, the more people they meet and they connect with, and people remember their names, so we help them advance in their jobs and helps them think on their toes. It really prepares them when they have those deeper conversations, when they end up speaking in intense conversations and things like that. And their small talk will help lead to that, to deeper conversations. It helps them meet people, and that's always really important. I think this is really great about traveling as well. When you go traveling, if you're really good at small talk, then you're able to have these incredible experiences. And that's one thing that I love about small talk is now I find that the places that I travel, I always have these unique experiences because I'm very comfortable speaking with strangers. And so when you teach your students small talk, then they will have the same kind of confidence where they can go up to people and they can just begin speaking in English. So it really helps them meet people and have these unique experiences that they'll thank you for. It teaches them about culture, and that's.
How are you?
I'm okay, Mike. How about you?
I'm good, thanks. How was your weekend?
It was good. The weather was nice.
Yeah, the weather was great. But it's raining today.
Yeah. How is your wife?
She's great, thanks. Did you watch the football last night?
No, I was at the movies.
What did you see? Do you like movies?
I saw Scream 4. Yes, I like movies. Do you?
Yes, but I don't like scary movies.
I have to go to a meeting now. See you later.
Yes, see you later, Sue.
Hello. Okay, so now we can go back to the conversation. Let me hide this. Okay, the presentation. So isn't that a great video? That was a bit of fun. And the great thing is that with these kind of extra normal videos, you can get a few free. Not everything's free, but they can create their own conversations. They can use something like Go Animate, and they can create their own small talk situations and small talk scenarios as well. So what's the point? Well, the point of all this is to get them to practice in enough small talk activities and do so many small talk activities that they're comfortable enough to have flow, they have emergent language. And so thinking about these things and these goals in mind, when we think of ideas, we have to think of how we would teach small talk. And it used to be that I used to use this as one session, but then I started thinking this is really important. So these are some different ideas that how I have taught small talk and with my adult students in particularly. But not only that, but how these ideas, I think which ones worked really well as well. So hopefully you can use some of these with your students. So intercultural communication. A lot of these ideas, I used to use a script. What I mean by that is I used to use this really great article actually that I found on ESL about small talk, and they would read the article, and you can find all that in the links below. I just gave the URL for where you would find all these things after the presentation. But the great thing was that they had some starters and some conversation starters, and the students really liked this, and I'll share with you some of those starters. And so I just have my students read that as a kind of background information on what small talk is, and that's like the first step is them reading this article. But a lot of times we found when I was discussing with them, even in Germany, I was teaching adults, and for about 4 years I did the small talk conversations with them each semester. And so one of the things that I found though was that small talk is very intercultural. It depends where you are and it depends where you're from. And so a lot of times I would find that my adult students, some of them, the German students would offend American students during small talk conversations, because it was very natural for my students, even when we started small talk, when they first met me, they would automatically ask things about politics and bring up conversations like this. And for them, this was something that would be the norm. It would be culturally normal. I had some students from Russia, and they would say the same. They said asking personal things is part of small talk. So it depends on the culture, and I think that we need to preface this when we begin teaching that, you know, we have to ask our students, well, what's appropriate small talk for your particular culture in your language, and then we can talk and approach and say, well, for English speaking, the UK, America, Canada, if you're dealing with these cultures when you're speaking English, then this is what's the norm for that, or these are kind of the rules to follow. Because they may be speaking English with people from India, and those are going to be different small talk rules and small talk topics. So I want to preface this with that. So introductions. That's the first part. We have to get them to learn how to introduce themselves. A handshake is usually a very cultural thing that works in a lot of business situations. But this isn't going to always work in a different situation. I'll show you that in a little bit. But, you know, one of the first steps is how to introduce themselves. They just can't come up and start talking small talk with just anyone. So we talk about also as well who you would have small talk with. And so who would you have small talk with? You can type that in the chat box. And what kind of situations would you encounter small talk situations? And this is how this is what I begin with my students. I ask them these questions, and they'll say something like, oh, at a conference. We have small talk at a conference. So if you're going to ISFL, you can have small talk with me there. You can have small talk while you're waiting for the bus, at a meeting. It's sometimes strangers. You can have complete conversations with strangers and small talk conversations when you're traveling. Yes, exactly. Waiting in a queue in a line, waiting Those are a lot of times you can have small talk conversations. And I tell my students, in your own language, practice small talk, when you're waiting for the bus or the subway, or because then you get comfortable meeting strangers, and then you can do small talk in your own language. And then you can also have okay, so Janet says at the beginning of the lesson she calls it chit chat. Very good. I like that a lot, Janet. That's a great idea to call it that. But this way they can get used to the idea of approaching strangers and having small talk situation. Now this only happens usually though when you're meeting new people, but it's not always new people. It could be acquaintances. It could be the boss. You have small talk with the boss. And then so another things we have to teach is proximity. What's the different types of norms for their culture? I know in Brazil, the proximity, the space between two people is very close. You can give hugs. I was told right away that after giving my presentations and workshops in Brazil, they expected me to give them a hug, even if I hadn't known them, and give them the kisses, and then on the side, which I was used to in Europe. And I'm from a culture, Latin culture, Latina, and this is something that I'm comfortable with, this proximity. But not a lot of people are like that. If you go, for example, to the East Coast in the U.S., they're not going to be very comfortable with hugs, and so you have to talk about proximity and the laws and things like that for them to have very effective small talk. They can't make it it's uncomfortable. And proximity just means the space between two people. Appropriate topics. Now this is going to change in every culture. The common appropriate topics that they can have are weather, current events, common experiences, sports news, and the surrounding environment. What I mean by that is, for example, you know about weather and current events, which is, things that are happening locally then. For example, when we are going to another country, we can talk about a festival or a fair that's approaching. Common experiences, what that means is, like, for example, if you're waiting for the bus and you're always waiting for this particular bus, you could say something along the lines like, oh, wow, this bus is never on time, or something like that, and that's a great way to start a small talk situation. Things about the surrounding environment. You can mention something about the architecture. If you're at a house party, you can say, wow, I really like the food. The food that's catered at this event seems really good, or have you tried the food? Or so we can talk about things and grab things from where we're at. Or, for example, if you're in the park, you may say something like, oh, what a cute dog you have, or a cute baby. So these are all different things that will determine your small talk conversation. Inappropriate topics. Oh, I don't know why I put weather current event. Sorry, wrong thing for the slide. I'll fix it. But my students actually listed them, so we'll actually talk about these inappropriate topics in a little bit. But one of the things I do is I actually have my students we concept map it. So a concept map is basically you put something in the middle like a bubble, and then what you do is, oh, that's great. Oh, that's fantastic. Your board looks like that. I'm not the only one that does this. And then they provide this. So I provide the thing. I would usually put small talk, and then we branch off and we'll do things like topics, weather, and then we'll go. But this is another way I've done it. I actually made it in a chart one time. So here you can see the topics, and these are the topics they came up with. These are some starters that they came up with for each topic. This is where we talked about inappropriate topics. And some of the inappropriate topics they put there are politics, gossip, private possessions. So, for example, it would be uncomfortable if you start talking about like maybe the Rolex, and you keep going, for some types of cultures, if you begin talking about things like the Rolex watch and you go on, they get very uncomfortable. Their purse, or their money, or personal traits. If a man says, for example, that's a very good question. Ian says, wouldn't politics be something in current events too? Yes, but politics, I guess personal politics. We should have prefaced that by saying personal politics, like saying, oh, I can't believe, like some of my German students would come up to me the first time they met me and say, I can't believe, you know, you would have Bush as your president. That's, that's, that's awful. How could Americans do that? And so that's offensive, you know, that makes people not want to talk to them anymore. Compliments, if you're always complimenting someone, and this is more for a guy and a girl. So if you go up and the first thing you say to a girl, oh, you have such beautiful hair, and I mean, and this isn't, she might feel uncomfortable, like it's, she's being harassed. So these are things we have to be careful of. Religion, um, private news. So for example, if you go up to a colleague at work and you're having small talk, then you wouldn't want to bring up their divorce, because this is small talk conversation. So sensitive topics and dicey topics. And dicey might be a word you can teach them, but dicey means that basically they're conversations that are going to lead possibly to things you don't really want to talk about. For example, you don't want to talk about maybe the new firing, okay? Because then that might lead to something about, you know, a company policies or anything like that in a business situation, because then you could get in trouble for leaking out news or something like that. So those would be dicey topics. And gossip, well, the thing about gossip is if you go in a bus line and you say, wow, I can't believe that girl, she's so rude, and you're talking to a guy or something, it might be her husband. So that's why it's never a good thing to gossip, or they could say, hey, that's my friend you're talking about. So gossip is never a good thing either. But celebrity gossip, well, that's different. You can talk about celebrity gossip, and that comes out in small talk as well. So over here is where you see the vocabulary and phrases that we come up with. So these are some of the things they didn't understand during the conversation. We talked about it. Oh, up here we did a little concept map. We put that sometimes the conversation, and these were characteristics, adjectives we associated with small talk. Superficial, they came up with light conversation, that you talk to acquaintances, colleagues, strangers. And so this is what we came up with. And this was the inappropriate topics again, private problems. That's why I didn't say it right. And this is what they came up with, that you can talk about weather, profession, the work, office. Somebody said something about a music teacher, because that's what one of them did, one of my adult students. News, celebrities, local events, travel, and some compliments. You can compliment, like say, wow, you did a really great presentation up there. Context, it's really important we teach about context, because over here you're going to have one type of small talk, and this is Tokyo subway that I followed. But you can have small talk there, and it's going to be a much different, the small talk conversation, than over here if you're talking with the boss or at a company event or an office event. So it's good to practice both, and I like to practice both with role plays, but you could do something like the extra normal videos where they compare and contrast, where they compare themselves in one situation, or you can use something like goanimate.com, and I'll put that. That one's really good for doing conversations, and it's free too. It's a free tool. And then you can put the context, because it gives you different scenes and stuff to practice. You can have them make comics about the differences between the types of small talk conversations they would have in both. And in nonverbal communication. And nonverbal communication is really important. One way I teach it is by nonverbal cues. So even who they would approach. And so this is one. So in the nonverbal cues, one of the questions I would ask you is, which one of these people would you approach to have small talk conversation? And that's what we do. We go outside and we've actually looked at the nonverbal communication of certain people, and we say which one that we would do. So would you do A, B, C, or D? Which person? I'll ask you that right now. So looking at their nonverbal communication there, because they're not saying anything. If you were a stranger in a different country and you wanted to practice small talk, which one would you approach? Even if it's something like asking directions, who would you approach? Okay, so most people agree. Well, basically, Janet and teacher says that it's the girl. Yes, why? What nonverbal cues is she showing you that she would be possibly willing to talk or have a small conversation? She is kind of smiling. Onion says, yes. Um, she's kind of smiling. She has kind of a smile. We call that smize. When you smile with your eyes, she has kind of that going on. Her body is open. She doesn't seem to be distracted or rude. When somebody holds their hand like this, that's a definite sign that they're closed off. They do not want to talk to you. I tell my teachers if they're in the middle, I mean my students, that if the person is in the subway and they're reading the newspaper or they have a book, or they have earphones even, you don't want to disrupt what they're doing and have small talk. They're not going to appreciate that. This guy looks like he's bored, and this guy just looks like he's angry. So I think it's really important to teach that, and this helps them with other things as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some activities. Well, you can try having them have small talk over here with the eslfast.com robot. And he has different kinds of types of small talk conversations that he will do. There's a whole list. There's the weather, sports, and this one is all typing because they lost funding. So you can go and he's Mike the tutor, and you just type whatever it is in here, and then you copy it, and he chats back. It's not perfect, but you can listen to the conversations here first as a practice, and then you go and then the student practices. I think this is a great website for going and having your students practice. And with chatting, it's not the same as a face-to-face chat, but the great thing about it is that it is as good as them practicing the conversation and learning the different types of starters. So how do they learn the starters? Well, oh, why is this? Okay, so I'll go back. But there's something called Mingo that I used to do, small talks in pairs. So what I did was I took actual types of starters. I passed out index cards to each student, and I have them fill out appropriate small talk starters, like, how about this weather? Or we get it from the board that I showed you earlier. So they have little index cards, and they fill out starters. They can get it either from the board, once we already elicited, and the reason we do that is so that way the grammar can be correct for this. But we just do any types, hello, how are you, anything that would lead to small talk conversations, okay? And then so they fill out lots of those. And then what I do is I divide the class into pairs. You can see them over here in pairs, these people. They face each other, they stand up. And then each person gets a card, but the card is going to be face down. Let's see. See if I have something here that looks like a card. Yeah, I do. Okay, hold on just a second. Okay, so let's pretend this is the card. They have the card face down. They don't look at it. And then what you do is you describe a scenario, and you press the timer for 1 minute, and you tell them go. So we'll pretend that this is the timer, because there's a nifty little timer that you can always put on your cell phone here. So I'm going to put the timer here actually. So I have my timer, and when I press start, then I say go, and student A, only one student, student A, will flip over their card, and they read out loud to the other person whatever the conversation starter is, okay? And then you had already told the scenario, so you do the context. So the scenario would be something like, I would say, you're waiting in line to ride the roller coaster, okay? And so they turn around, and it says, oh, how about the weather? And then their goal is for 1 minute. They have to try and keep this conversation. When they finish, then you ask them about, then you have student B do this as well, and they go for 1 minute. And they have a different scenario that you would call out. So when the timer stopped, then, and both of them went, then you ask them to report about what occurred. Did they feel comfortable? Could they continue the conversation? How they continued it? Because it's good for them to understand how to carry on the conversation, learn from each other. Another idea is speed dating, and this works really well. Oh wait, before I do that though, with Mingo, here are some tips for Mingo. Try both standing up and sitting down. Have them role play various small talk situations. So not just waiting on the bus, but also at the Christmas party, in an interview, things like that. Do a few rounds without conversation starters. So after they get comfortable with conversation starters, then you can have them go ahead and do things just from the top of their head. You just tell them the scenario, and this works out better, and they're more comfortable. But this is usually after like the first initial round. Ask students which is easier, standing up and having these conversations or sitting and having conversations. And then ask students to report back and analyze their conversations. The other one is speed dating. So what you do is you divide the class and you seat them across from each other. And you can kind of see it in this picture where they're seated across from each other. And each one actually has a sheet of paper. And it's usually a small sheet of paper and it has everyone's name in the class. And then it has, it's a chart. They have like a box. Well, it's called speed dating, but it really isn't. It's just like you steal the concept for adults. And so what I do is they are not doing this to date. What they do is the scenario is they say, I tell them the company is partnering co-workers for a special project. You have to figure out who you'd be most compatible with since you'll work with him or her for the year. So basically you're stuck with this colleague for the year on an important project where you spend lots of time together. So you have to find out who you would want to work with the most. We're pretending that everybody here is new to each other. So you don't know each other that well. And then so they're handed the card with everyone's names and then likes, dislikes, hobbies, similarities, differences, because you're still learning the same things like you would if you were speed dating them, see? But this way it doesn't make it so sensitive. And then the teacher starts the timer for 1 to 2 minutes. It's up to you if you think they can do 2 minutes. And then each student tries to find out as much about the other person by talking. Then they switch to the next person and it goes on and on. So when they finish talking, she'll go to this one. Have one row, just the first row, the row on the left, switch chairs. And then have the other row not switch. So that way everybody can keep doing this. You can do this standing up as well. They must mark down at the end 3 people they like to work with and write a short paragraph explaining why. Now the reason why I do this, there's a particular reason. They hand this in to me, but they don't see this for each other, and there's 2 reasons for that. I don't want anybody to be hurt. People don't say they're compatible with a particular person. That could happen. So this way it's anonymous. But sometimes you'll see that they'll talk to each other and they'll tell each other, and I will allow that because, well, I can't stop it anyway. But then I use this for grouping as well, for grouping activities. Then I say, well, you know, when we have partnering activities or projects, then you two, these are the people that I will usually put you with. And then I get to see, you know, and that works out because you get to see who would work out with each other. You can try virtual small talk sessions. You can go on Google Hangout. This is Google Hangout. And here we're having a meeting here, but you can see us all smiling because we have small talk, and small talk is great virtually as well, and you can have those face-to-face conversations. So that's a great thing you can encourage your students to do using free things like Google Chat or Skype. They can do it with Skype. Record the conversations so that way you have them for another class or for later. The Google Hangout, that's a great question. So the question was, how do you do the Google Hangout? You have to register for Google Plus. So HTTP, well, I'll find it for you. But yeah, you go to Google Plus, and then on Google Plus, on the right-hand side, you will find where it says that you can do the Google Plus Hangout. But you have to be registered for Google Plus. That's just the one thing that you do have to do. So let me go ahead and put but then you can also have them record the conversations. Well, you can talk about a video on YouTube with Google Hangouts. So you can have it to where the video automatically comes up. You can even do a document. You can share a document. So if you had small talk conversations, the document like a worksheet or something, then you could always do that as well. You could share that with them. Record the conversations. You can do this usually with a cell phone, or if you have audio recorders in the classroom, a tape recorder even. And this way they can go back, they can play, and they can correct their vocabulary, they can correct their idioms, they can correct their any kind of mistakes in grammar that they did. And that's how I deal with a lot of the grammar mistakes. I also observe, and in the background while they're having the conversations, I tell them I'm going to observe you, so I'll write down, and at the end, I won't interrupt you, but at the end we'll go over the mistakes. Videotape the conversations, and that's a great idea if you can videotape them, because that way you can use them for future lessons. You can ask their permission to do that, but that way it's a great way to study a small talk conversation, the whole thing, and real small talk conversations, because these are ones that you are encouraging the class to do. But another great reason for that is they can see their nonverbal. They can see if they stand like this, and they can correct it. It's a great way for them to correct nonverbal. And I think it's good to correct nonverbal, because when they go to other countries, they want to make sure that they have a friendly stance, and a lot